Reader emotional resonance is often treated as something mysterious. It feels like a quality some writers simply have and others lack. But that view is misleading. Emotional resonance is not magic. It is the result of specific narrative mechanics. It is a structural craft that any writer can learn, practice, and master. The question worth asking is simple. Why does one story leave a reader changed, while another leaves them indifferent? The answer comes down to three interlocking forces. The first is character interiority. The second is authentic voice. The third is genre-calibrated stakes. When these three elements align, engagement is no longer an accident. It becomes an outcome you can design. Let us begin with the foundation, character interiority. Every authentic character carries 3 layers of inner life operating at the same time. These layers create what we can call layered friction. At the surface sits immediate perception. This is how the character actively observes the present moment. What they notice, what they ignore, and what they cannot help but see. Beneath that layer lies the memory filter. Every observation is processed through the weight of past experience. A character who grew up in poverty notices prices differently than one who never did. A survivor notices exits. Buried deepest is the subconscious desire. This is the pull the character may not even consciously recognize. It is the thing they want most but cannot admit, even to themselves. It often contradicts their stated goals and their rational choices. This layered friction is not backstory. It is the living architecture of voice. When perception, memory, and desire operate in tension, interiority becomes something a reader can feel. The prose hums with it. Now let us move from the character to the shape of the story itself. In literary fiction, the engine of the plot is not a sequence of external events. The plot is the shift in a character's internal perspective. We call this the psychological landscape. Here, a character's interiority directly shapes the thematic motifs of the work. As their internal state evolves, so do the metaphors and the subtext around them. Consider a character who cannot forgive herself. She might live in a house with the mirrors covered. She might flinch from reflective surfaces. She might notice with bitter precision when other people look at themselves without shame. Every recurring image becomes structural. The motif acts as a bridge. It translates the psychological landscape into resonant plot elements. In literary fiction, the internal is the external plot. This is why a story can hold a reader even when almost nothing happens on the surface. A woman tends a garden. A man drives through a town he grew up in. The action is minimal, but if the interiority is fully rendered, the reader is gripped by something they may not be able to name. Now let us walk through specific genres. In each one, the mechanics of resonance work in a slightly different way. We begin with romance. In romance, the core engine is not mutual attraction. It is the internal journey toward emotional readiness. Characters begin with defensive walls protecting their interiority. The tension builds against what we can call the readiness threshold. Resonance strikes when a character becomes capable of the deep connection they fear the most. Crossing that threshold is the real payoff. Not the kiss, not the declaration. The readiness. Think of true connection in romance as the alignment of 2 distinct interiorities. Each character carries a complex network of values, hidden needs, and past wounds. As the story unfolds, their emotional nodes begin to connect. A vulnerability shared by one resonates with a core need in the other. That alignment is the structural foundation of a satisfying romance. Next, consider the thriller. In thrillers, the dominant emotional frequency is dread. This is not fear of what has happened. It is fear of what is about to happen. Resonance comes from an intimate bond between reader and protagonist. That bond is built on competence and vulnerability in equal measure. The reader must believe the character is capable enough to survive. They must also believe the character is fragile enough to lose. When a thriller protagonist is purely competent, the reader admires but does not resonate. We need to see what the protagonist stands to lose. A child, a sense of self, a world that still makes moral sense. The most durable thrillers run on 2 tracks at once. The external track is the plot. The internal track is the character confronting what they are willing to do. It is also the cost of that doing. Resonance lives in the gap between action and consequence. Now let us turn to crime and mystery. In crime fiction, resonance often lives in moral ambiguity. The investigator usually begins by believing in the clarity of justice. The crime is a disruption. Solving it should restore order. But the best crime fiction complicates that belief. The closer the protagonist gets to the truth, the more the truth unsettles them. A witness who should be innocent turns out to be complicit. A perpetrator turns out to be understandable, even sympathetic. The investigator's internal map of the world shifts under their feet. Readers resonate with crime fiction not only because they love puzzles. They resonate because they share the protagonist's desire to make sense of a world that resists sense. The emotional payoff is not the solution. It is what the protagonist does with what the solution reveals. It reveals something about the world and about themselves. Now we reach horror. Horror operates on a deeper frequency than fear of monsters or harm. The true engine of horror is existential dread. Dread is not the fear that the creature will kill the character. Dread is the fear that the world is not what we believed it to be. That safety was an illusion. That love cannot protect us. That the universe is indifferent to our suffering. Great horror uses supernatural or extreme elements to reach fears that realistic fiction cannot touch. The haunted house is not about the house. It is about grief, guilt, and the weight of the past refusing to release us. The monster is not about the monster. It is about whatever we cannot face directly in ordinary life. Resonance in horror comes when the reader feels the texture of that underlying fear. It is the fear beneath the fear. And the reader recognises it as their own. 2 more genres deserve a brief look. In historical fiction, writers face a unique challenge. The reader often knows what is coming. They know who loses which battle. They know which empire falls. The resonance here comes from what we can call temporal intimacy. The reader inhabits a consciousness that cannot see what the reader can. A soldier writing home in 1917 does not know 1918 is coming. A merchant in Pompeii does not know the mountain is about to exhale. This dramatic irony is not a cheap trick. It is the core emotional mechanism of the form. The reader holds the character's hope and the weight of knowing at the same time. That double consciousness, caring and knowing together, is a profound and specific kind of grief. Finally, consider science fiction. This genre has the most counterintuitive relationship with resonance. It specialises in distance, in displacement, in making the familiar strange. And yet, the best science fiction draws resonance from exactly that estrangement. By placing human experience inside a world with different rules, a writer can isolate emotion. A story about grief in a world where memories can be harvested forces us to ask what grief truly is. A story about identity in a world where bodies can be altered forces us to ask what the self truly means. The science fictional premise is the instrument. The human interiority it operates on is the subject. So let us return to where we started. Emotional resonance is not a gift reserved for a lucky few. It is built from layered interiority, internal change, and stakes calibrated to your genre. Render perception, memory, and desire, intention. Let the internal shift drive the plot. Then tune your stakes to the emotional frequency your genre demands. When you do this with intention, resonance stops being an accident. It becomes a craft you can practice and master.